old Gaelic poems.
Yeah, you were telling me.
And I thought you might enjoy
Sure,
some of those. I should have Xerox, but as I said, I didn't get a chance to do much homework here. I'll give you some examples. What I did Xerox, and you could take with you, Barry, would be, I mentioned to you that one by Donacharu Macamara from the time of about the time of the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The reason it should be pretty well dated that way is that he was impressed into the English Navy the same time as Sarsfield O'Sullivan, who might possibly be distantly related. We don't push it because Sarsfield fathered innumerable illegitimate children. and then he became very pious in his old age and wrote nothing but religious poetry, which is completely worthless now. But his ballads and things were very good. That happens with a lot of people. You know, there's Ernest Dowson that wrote The Days of Wine and Roses, and a number of things that I like very much. Nothing that after he was converted, he didn't write anything that is memorable or worth preserving. You know, a couple of ecstatic things about the Cathedral of Chartres or something. They'll never be in an anthology. When he was a sinner, he wrote well. Once he got religion, that ruined it. But this is, we could properly sliced up that you can see. The one that I referred to, that's down in phonetic translation, is. I sang that for you the last time, a little bit of it. As I was walking one evening fair, August Megadhen Kamalihan. The one that takes back in Gaelic what it says in English. Well, that's the whole of it. Those three and that. What brought that to my mind was my brother, on that topic of Sarsfield O'Sullivan, you know, becoming pious in his old age. Mm-hmm. He wrote a poem on that of the remorse of Sarsfield. And then this one there was a fragment in Gaelic that my father had from that same period, and he tried to capture it's really a poem of his own that's inspired by a fragment. The fragment refers to someone saying, you know, in some poetical fashion, if you won't marry me, I'll kill myself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how far into Europe that custom existed. I believe it was certainly common in England and Ireland, or where it might be common in many other places in the world. But used to bury suicides at the crossroads. I assume that the reason was so that just the opposite of preserving their memory, so that people, with no headstone or anything, so they would be maybe forgotten. I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea why they did that.
The crossroads were often a way of a place where people got unspelled from things too, and I wonder if they wouldn't use the body of a suicide as
that could be.
I know the crossroads
to sort of exercise.
Yeah, maybe so.
That could be.
You can get rid of styes on your eye at a crossroads. At night and so on.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Or I wonder if the cross, making any kind of sign of the cross,
the sign of the cross,
a chance of
that could be too. Yeah.
Having some effect on the dead person, maybe, or at least keeping him buried or something.
Right. Yeah.
Keeping him from rising.
They did hold a lot of the patterns, the dances at Crossroads.
Yeah.
In my mother and father's youth, in fact, the assistant, the curate of Aries, must have been a frightfully neurotic fellow. He was always breaking up dances. And he had the very appropriate name. Sounds like the family must come over with Cromwell's army. Father Godly. He just couldn't. It sounds ridiculous for the kind of character he was.
An 18th century play.
Right, it does. I remember my dad mentioned he saw him used to whip on some fellow who was, he was coming home, and saw some fellow with too much drink taken and cracked his whip on him. And I remember my dad saying, my dad would have been maybe 17 or 18, he said, if he did that to my father, he said, I'd kill him. And Dad mentioned that one time, one fellow with too much taken got, Father Godley cracked the whip on him, and he pulled him, he was a big, powerful man. He pulled him from his horse and threw him over the ditch, the fence, the wood, the stone fence. And then this fellow died in a drowning accident, so people thought it was the curse for having belted the priest. But I'll find a couple of these to show you.
One man in Anaconda told me he had lived in Ireland between 1912 and 1914 and 1920, because his father he had gone over with his mother, and then his father didn't want him to come back because of the fear of a submarine torpedo or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so he said that there the priests were often the law. They lived in County Galway on one of the islands in the bay, and the constables were miles away. He had several stories of punishments meted out by the
parish priest, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know there's one fellow still living in this parish. He's the man I mentioned to you that you know, if he weren't so very, very shy, it would be just ideal. But you know, if I didn't even say you were folklorist, that just any other company even, you know, to have him here, he's very, very shy. But, trying to find, I think the one particular one I was looking for that is a real Englishing of something of an old Gaelic poem that my father knew by heart, which the title of it is Trúgan Misha Sassenach, which is I wish to God I was in England. And
is that meant to be ironic?
And it's no, it isn't. It was it's sort of a love song. I think I'm trying to think what I think the premise of it is that his true love is already in England. But that's something like that. This is the Englishing my brother did of it, and this is the melody of the Gaelic. I don't know a line of the Gaelic poem. It's my grief, I am not in England, nor boarded from Erin bound, for all the ocean's fury, where many the ship is drowned, o'er wave and wave unspeeding, nor heeding the wind and rain. O King, might you be leading me back to my love again. And that's all there's to it.
Oh, that's nice.
But,
that's an old, originally an old Gaelic.
right, and that's my father gave Eamon the literal translation, and then Eamon sort of put it so that Englished it so that it would sing. You know, this has nothing to do with that particular with the Irish tradition, but I think you might enjoy it. Of different things the only things that in that period when he was trying to do that, he had 3 little poems in the New Yorker. They sent in under the pen name of Michael Bantry. And then he did a number of serious things, religious themes. And then he did some little entertainments, and this is one that you might enjoy as an entertainment. When Thomas Merton, his first book, details the story of his early life and his conversion to Catholicism and his becoming a Trappist monk. And then the next 2 books, I forget in which order they are, Waters of Siloé and Sign of Jonas, he kind of debates with himself, should he continue to write poetry? Or should he, is that consistent with being a good monk? Or is it too worldly an occupation? And should he remain a Trappist or become a Carthusian? Carthusians are an even more strict order of the church. They live in hermitages clustered around a chapel, so that the Trappists at least have certain functions in common, like coming together for their meals and so on. But the Carthusians they live the eremitical life, and so it's even more strict. And he apparently had the bent in that direction. So my brother wrote him and said, what you should do is not even think about becoming a Carthusian, but choose the most difficult thing of all is become a parish priest, diocesan. Fight with the Ladies' Aid Society and everything else. And so this is he wrote to Merton. Merton was a monk at the Trappist Abbey at Gethsemane, and in the particular book that kind of spurred this, my brother, They still had a rule in those days. They relaxed it with the Vatican Council. But you weren't supposed to take a picture. Trappist monk was never to have his, once he became a monk, his face photographed. So the only photograph you'd see of a Trappist monk would be, you'd see the cowl. And in the end papers of this book, you see a monk on top of a hay wagon in one photograph. And then you see another one, he's walking into a woods, with his, reciting his office and so on. And that's kind of a little background to this that you might enjoy this. Thomas a Gethsemane baits the cowl with poetry. Who would clap each Godward man to hell or go Cistercian? Saves for cigarettes a curse bleak as T.S. Eliot's verse. Might his better blasts address to his indecisiveness. Still tempts heaven every time Thomas puts his hand to rhyme. Still is not entirely sure writing verses for the pure. Fear of the Carthusian louse keeps him from the Charterhouse. Thomas, is it the devil's ruse, tempts you bookly go chartreuse, or state Trappist, why not man, cast with me diocesan? Dante grant you boiled in hell, parish clerks but monks as well. Geoffrey Chaucer, who I hear, banged your friar across the ear, sent not to red helle down, any parson of a town. Thomas, Thomas, why the fuss? Simon Peter's one of us. Abelard, who unsettled so Abbot Bernard of Clairvaux, later came to know this fact by the desert fathers backed. Prudent clerics learned to flee, maids who learned theology. Peter, having had his fling, went Cistercian, solving nothing. Devils not the least deceive those the parish care would leave. Ours own cure, but for God, might have died Cistercian shod. Even I might not be saved if I this or that behaved. Thomas, when the monthly bills dwarf the everlasting hills, when a ladies' aid debate tempts me from the higher state, tempts me to the easy way, making verse and making hay, vaguely pictured on a wane, faceless, lest some think me vain, or aft enjoying in a wood my daily photoed solitude. Juan de la Cruz that calls me not, Matthew, Mark, and Luke I've got, each a stout diocesan. That is not to slander Juan, nor you, Thomas, pray for light, as a holy pastor might. Thomas, you could stand the gaff, courage, earn the epitaph. Thomas Merton, happy man, died a good diocesan. And then he wrote back to Eamon, and he did a little verse in the same meter saying, on one point, Eamon, you're not right. The louse, sir, is a Cenobite. Indeed, I think I have been bitten 80 times since you have written. The main suggestion in your poem tempts me from my Trappist hoem. Such advice, no doubt surprising, opens up a new horizon. I may not earn that epitaph, but you at least have made me laugh.
Jeez.
This is just one of these teeny little scraps that doesn't mean too much, but I don't know who named it, but it must have been among the earliest of the Irish in Butte. There's a little lake out on the flat here. This is the golf course now, that they call Lake Avoca.
Huh.
And what brought that to my mind, I have no idea of who it was that named it after this little glen in County Wicklow in Ireland. But one of Thomas Moore's, one of the more popular of his songs, so many of them, were really written for the English drawing room, but they did preserve some lovely airs. So I'm glad he wrote them, even if the words don't survive long. One was, they call it the Meeting of the Waters, a sweet vale of Avoca, and which is in any standard, book of Irish songs and so on. My father had one line of it, or one little parody that was common in his youth, and it was, sweet vale of Avoca, or no, O vale of Avoca, Tom Moore called thee sweet, but if he roved through thy glades with no brogues on his feet, or slept in thy shade without blanket or sheet, he'd not give a good damn where the bright waters meet. And kind of the spirit of the young Irish that had to immigrate. And they romanticized Ireland with people like Thomas More.
Yeah.
There was the song that you sang for us just a minute ago.
A little bolero.
Yeah. Could you sing that again before it passes from my mind?
Sure. It's and this is some of them other verses I might think of later, but as much as I can remember now.
Right, that's one.
It's St. Lawrence. A sad wake because it was a young mother, and the tension is all the more powerful in a sad wake.
Mm-hmm.
And Jersey Mary came in. Well, she's regarded as a pretty comical character in the neighborhood anyway. They were still having the wakes at home in those days. And she knelt at the kneeler next to the coffin, and a wreath came just beautifully right over her head from those that were perched all over the coffin. And she said, the Irish for Jesus Christ is Yes a Christ. She said, Yes a Christ I next. she took it as a sign from God.
Well, now if you were a superstition given to that type
That's
of
right,
prophecy,
yeah. I kept trying to think, since you had mentioned it, Barry, if I could get this off, about any, the fairy tales and so on. And I can't really, and I suspect that to a certain degree some of that would be because whatever ones my father knew, he would not be that interested in. I don't think he had that high a regard for them.
right?
Whereas he did have a high regard for little fragments of the epic poetry, for people like Cuchulainn and Oisin, the Irish Homer.
Yeah.
And even, let's say, our dogs would be named after mythological, like Bran, mythological explorer or traveler, whatever you'd say. Wow. It's a very popular name, I guess, with the, I don't know what form they use, but with the Breton, the people in France. But, so he had regard for figures of mythology, but not that he just kept trying to think of anything, after you asked me that about fairy tales and so on, I just can't think of any. Now, how much of that was his, as you mentioned, censoring out? What he would choose to. I suspect that there was probably a lot censored out. Not that he thought it would be harmful to us, but he thought it might be useless. Since I know my dad regarded novels as completely useless.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He thought that was something, say, for the entertainment of young girls, but not in any value if you were sensible.
But poetry and song were sensible.
Shows you.
Now, the only place-
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Poetry, yes.
Yeah.
And he would read, like, say, in his copy of Shakespeare. See, when Dad came here, he had virtually no formal education. They got into school maybe about 2 months out of a year for a few years in his childhood. And he came here and he just haunted the public library. And whoever was the public librarian at the time, I'd love to look up the name, because I feel very grateful to a man whose name I don't even know. He took an interest in the young greenhorn who was trying to teach himself things. And he used to give my father any book he wanted that was being condemned. If somebody left a book out in the rain, or the spine was broken, or it was being replaced, he'd just mark it with a big purple stamp so that, it would be known it wasn't stolen. Condemned, Butte Public Library at the date. And when I was a kid in grade school, maybe about 5th or 6th grade, and I heard about condemned books, I thought, my God, if the nuns visit our house, they'll see all my father's books are condemned. There's all these history books. And, But I know that he'd had no regard for novels. He thought that was a terrible waste of time.
Sure.
Whereas to read a biography, to read history, to read poetry, that was good.
Of course, that's the old, it seems to me, that's a retention of the old Irish bardic tradition in which poetry was considered really quite challenging and manly and necessary to life.
Yeah, I think so.
It was the British, after all, who started those interminably long novels. There may have been a political
Could have been,
aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
But, I've been also thinking about those fairy tales and folk tales, and it's true that a lot of people can't think of them when asked, but when they're sparked by some kind of situation, people will tell them. It's exactly like joke telling. People will tell jokes not realizing that they're folk tales, jocular folk tales.
Right, yeah.
But you'll hardly ever just tell a joke. It's somehow brought up by a circumstance or someone else's joke or something like that.
Right, that's
and I have an idea a lot of stories are that way too, and it may be that your father didn't have, at least at home, the situations occurring that might have got him into telling those stories.
Right,
He may have had somewhere latent in his memory that maybe came out in other contexts.
And then too, many of them maybe I censored out in my own mind. you know,
Could be.
that I might have heard as a child or probably heard, and then they didn't. Maybe I didn't get the point,
Yeah.
and they didn't stay in my mind at all, which is kind of a pity. If you, just thinking of it from a point of view of the priesthood, I wish I were, say, just ordained, because I think more and more, please God, we'll be moving away from the very analytical theology and that way of presenting the truths of faith in sermons and so on, and get back more to storytelling. You know,
Sure.
and I've heard of some book on just that topic, and it's sort of coming full circle from the, you know, going to the extent of all the demythologizing, and now I have to remythologize.
Re-mythologize, sure. There was nothing wrong with the storytelling element of mythology ever, I think. Wittgenstein and others, you know, talk about how that's one of the ways we learn to think is by extending the horizons of our experience by stories. I mean, a story can center on something you do know and sort of feel out into the edges with logical aspects that you might not have thought of otherwise, but you can connect them to a story and they make sense.
Yeah.
You can hear a good joke once and tell it again. And I've always thought if you could make that into a principle of education, you could revolutionize education. I mean, imagine telling a kid something once, and that would be it. The kid could come out with it again. Now we have to drum them between the ears.
Right.
Years, and that doesn't work.
Yeah.
The story, I think the story is a very powerful way of thinking.
Wow. The only people that I have met that mentioned puka or we people, well, the only person that actually knew a story about it was this Steve Laughlin. Do you know Stephen Laughlin? He lives in Anaconda, and he was that man that I was telling you. He was his mother returned to Ireland, and they were living in this Killannon, this island right across from the Ireland.
I see.
And it was a very poor part of the country. They were all fishermen.
Yeah.
And his uncles, I think, scared him with stories. But he remembers one man coming in all muddy and saying that he would have been to the house on time, but he was following a man with a lantern, and he led him astray.
Yeah.
A wee person with a lantern. And
Yeah.
And they were cautioned not to go out at night because a puka might throw you over their shoulder and drag your face through the rocks and thorns.
Yeah.
And when he mentioned that to Kevin Shannon the other night, Kevin said, "No wonder they're all so ugly over there."
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. A story of asking about the banshee and so on. There was one priest from County Kerry, a great friend of my dad's, a little fellow, Father Clifford, and he was always with another Irish priest who was a great big husky man, and it was he was like a big Saint Bernard, you know, with a little kitten or something. This little Father Clifford, very diminutive, and Father Delane would see him and hug him, and Father Delane used to wear these glasses down the tip of his nose, and one of the funniest memories I have of him was kind of locking bumpers with an old nun down in St. James Hospital. You know, he's one of these people. Who was it said about Irving Villain, you have to hug him to hear him? Well, he was terribly deaf, Father Delane, and when he got up to talk to you, he practically was spitting on your nose all the time. He'd get so close to you. But he'd greet his old friend Father Clifford, and Father Clifford be most looking, and I'm sure he was, most uncomfortable under the crook of the arm of Delane walking around, and Delane being very friendly. But Clifford, he said his mother's family was followed by the banshee, and that they would, if any member of the family is going to die, that they would hear the wailing of the woman. And he said when he was a high school student, he was cycling home, and going past the churchyard, he heard this groan, and he thought, oh, this must be it. And he thought, no, it's got to have some natural explanation, and I'm going to find out. And he said he worked up all of his courage, and he stopped his bicycle, and he leaned it against the building. This is, of course, late at night. And he came closer and was coming from the churchyard, and he heard the repeated groan, and he walked into the churchyard and in past some of the headstones, and there at the back of the churchyard, it looked like the figure of Christ on the cross. And he continued to hear this moan. And he said, I'll go through my whole life wondering, what that was and thinking of some kind of an apparition or vision, unless I find out. So he just worked up all his courage and he got closer. And a sheep, the back of the churchyard in this little village in Kerry and it was surrounded with this iron fence. A sheep had come down this hill and tried to get over it and got, not really impaled, but got strung up on the iron fence and was bleating. And that was it. But he said that was his only experience
Really?
of, quote, the banshee.
Yeah.
But I do remember hearing my mother talk about someone in our area that this young man was at a fair in Castletown Baron and said to his friends that he heard this wailing, so he was going to go home. Somebody of his family was dying, and he started running home. And they said, like, maybe 4 miles or something later, they found him dead. And of course, the story was, well, that's who the wailing was for. It was for him, But I suppose it'd be almost maybe a test tube of such stories that my dad on this island, one of the men was building a boat and died, and the other people on the island said after his death that they could hear hammering, and my dad said his father and his grandfather had two very different reactions to it. My dad's father's reaction was, let's not talk about it. In other words, let the dead alone, and this is sort of sacred territory, and we're not going to talk about it. He said his grandfather was exactly the opposite. If any so-and-so was hammering late at night on the island, he was damn well was going to find out who was doing it, and they were going to stop it, the dad's grandfather left no room for any supernatural or preternatural interpretations at all. He wasn't interested in that.
Yeah.
And
Interesting that it's the older generation that was more skeptical.
Right, yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. I think it might too have something to do with his temperament, because he had dad's father had a very mild temperament, and his grandfather was a rather feisty fellow. One time when he was doing some work hauling something or other, could be manure, but something in a wheelbarrow for the Puxleys. These are the people who dispossessed the O'Sullivans, and down in they had a mansion just west of Castletown Bear. They're the people in Daphne du Maurier's book. She calls them the Brodericks. Well, he was hauling something through the gate, and they were all Welsh retainers around the Puxley estate. And he said, "Open the gate to the Welshman there." And he said, "Now speak English properly. In other words, I'll open the gate if you pronounce the word gate properly." And he said, "I speak as I write, a was 30th. Open the gate." He said, "I speak as I write, you foreign bastard." So that was the temperament that he had, Another sample of his temper was working in the mines. They were coming out of the mine one day, and he lost his cap, a knitted stocking cap. And he called back to one of his friends who was coming out on these cars, to pick up his cap, and his friend did, and then also slyly dipped it in a puddle of water as they were going out, and my great-grandfather could see that. He spotted what he did. So when he got outside and his friend handed him his cap, my great-grandfather just pulled it down over his head. And that family, the family got a nickname from that point that stayed with them. They were called the Pookeen Harringtons. Pookeen from, the Gaelicizing of a capuche. On Monk's Hood, They call them the Pookeen Harringtons from then on.
That's great.
So
Are most nicknames in Irish tradition earned that way, or that is sort of discovered in somebody's actions?
Some of them, I don't know. Now in our area, they've always fascinated me, Barry, and also what the Butte Irish did to them. For instance, one that was sort of earned, as you say, was Faibuch, which means, the closest word in English to it, I guess, is a mess. And that the people in Butte, that became firebug.
Oh, yeah.
The Faibuch Murphys, the Gaelic word Faibuch. I asked my dad, how did they get that nickname? He said, the old great-grandfather in that family, whenever you asked him how things were, this is almost typical of farmers, of course, he'd say it's a mess. Everything's a mess. How are things doing in Sean, Freiburg. It's a mess, you know. And so the family got that nickname. And that became Firebug to the
Firebug,
Butte
right.
people. But there's some of the others, some of them was by stature. I know there's one family, they were called the Ranines, from the little wren, you know, the Ranine Shays. And there are quite a variety of reasons for it. Some of the Butte ones are colorful.
Yeah.
You've probably heard some of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've heard some.
Like the fur-bearing Harringtons.
I hadn't heard about that one.
The father, there were the first Harringtons of this just very numerous clan that came to Butte. It was an English name they tacked onto about 5 or 6 different Irish names that they couldn't pronounce. And there were loads of Harringtons came to Butte, and the first of them that came, they called them the Yanks, because the others that arrived later were the ones who were here from all eternity. They arrived, let's say, 3 months before all the others.
Yeah.
And they were called the Harrington Yanks, and one division of them, one subdivision, the father won a baseball pool, and the mother was a wonderful seamstress. And she was always making dresses for her children. She had 5 daughters, one of whom we were told later married a Hungarian count, but a better version of it was she went to New York and became a madam. This would be, if she's living, she'd be maybe about 90 now. Well, one of the great fur-bearing Harringtons. At any rate, whenever the mother made new dresses for them, she'd always come to church maybe about 2 or 3 minutes late. So everybody would be in church, and then she'd troop her girls up the aisle in her handiwork. And I guess the day after or a few days after the first Sunday after the father won the baseball pool, he bought his wife a fur coat, and each of the daughters one of these little fur pieces. So that's settled there. Yeah.
Boy.
So there were family names, and then there were also personal names. I mean, there was someone told me about Jumping John Harrington, who supposedly could jump out of a barrel with his hands at his side.
It could be, yeah.